Well, welcome to chapter 1 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is Mr. Montgomery. Here it is on Thursday morning here at my home or my office. Actually, I'm standing in the middle of our living room. And I've got a step ladder holding the camera. And so anyway, this is what you get when you don't have a classroom. So this is my classroom. So let's start by talking about chapter 1 on speaking in public. It's kind of a general overview of the concepts of public speaking, but then also provide some very specific areas that it kind of gives us kind of a little bit of background on public speaking. So when we think of public speaking, we usually think of people who speak in front of groups on a daily basis for their job. So that's kind of my role as an instructor at different colleges. When I was a pastor of churches, I was up front every week. So that's kind of one perspective. But then also they want to expand the idea of speaking and communicating with others, that the things you learn in this course and through this textbook are not simply going to be in the arena of public speaking, but they can also be applied in other areas of our life. For example, interpersonal communication, when you're speaking with just one or two other people and learning how to communicate in the public setting, a lot of the principles can be applied over into that setting as well. But then also sometimes a job calls for just a lot of alone time, that you're not communicating with others very much, but at the same time, you have friends, you have family. Maybe you have to do oral reports for that kind of job, but there are other opportunities where we are speaking that we can learn skills and practices and good habits in speaking that can then be applied all over the place. They also then to talk about the tradition of public speaking, and they give a very brief overview of the tradition. And the thing you might want to take away from there is the idea of Aristotle and a book that he had written on rhetoric back, around 500 BC. And that book sets a lot of the principles that we use today, that we teach today, are coming from Aristotle. So he kind of set the course. He's the name you want to remember as far as tradition of public speaking. The textbook then goes into similarities and differences. And I think the strategy is, if we can find some similarities between what you do every day, you're not in front of people, but you're communicating every day. And if we can learn some things in that scenario, maybe we can transfer those over into public speaking. So it kind of gives you a leg up on the process. And there are some things that are different, but let's, get what we can. So they talk, for example, of that we organize our thoughts. Even if it is very brief, a process of organizing, we don't just say random things, that our brain is processing and organizing and putting thoughts together before we speak, hopefully before we speak. Some of us may be a little bit quick in our communicating, and we talk about not thinking through what you say before you say it. That can create some problems or issues for us. Second is, we shape the message based on who we are talking to. If you're talking to a close family member, that's going to be different than if you're talking to your boss or one of your employees. You're going to be more formal with your employees and probably more casual, more intimate with your family members. So who it is we talk to will do that. Using stories. People, I think, both love to tell stories and love to hear stories. Some of us like it telling stories too much. And if you ask our friends or family, they'll say, he's always coming up with a story. So we have to be careful, but stories are often a strategic tool to use in a public presentation. So if you're telling stories in personal situations, you can carry that over into the public setting. Also, feedback. We pick up feedback when we're talking with somebody else. If they seem disinterested, maybe we want to finish our story. If they seem like they are preoccupied or on the verge of tears, we may want to stop our talking and ask them what's going on in their life. So we take that feedback and we put it into play in our presentations. Okay, some of the differences that occur. Number one, we are definitely not as structured. We kind of touched on that earlier. We are not as structured in our personal communication, where in your speech presentations, for example, there is a lot of organization, a lot of strategizing, a lot of time put into developing the message before we ever present it. In fact, the presenting part is just kind of the coup de grace. It's the end of the process. And so that's a big difference. Second, we might use different vocabulary. If I'm speaking to you on a personal level, I'm probably going to be more casual in my vocabulary. When I'm speaking in front of others, I might use a whole different vocabulary, probably more articulate, probably more technical to the topic that I'm talking about. Maybe using bigger, maybe more impressive words. Probably less yas and huh-uhs, more yeses and nos, more polite in our vocabulary. And there's going to be a different delivery style. I'm going to stand up straight. I'm going to be aware of what I do with my hands. Maybe I'll just fold them in front of me. But I probably won't be, flopping around on a couch when I'm making a public presentation. Okay, next item is confidence. You want to have confidence when you're speaking in front of others, because that confidence will then also put you at ease and will reduce anxiety. Now for me, I've been doing a lot of public speaking for a lot of years, probably close to, over 30 years of public speaking. And I really don't get nervous unless I'm not well prepared. Then I have to stop and think, uh-oh, am I going to mess up? But preparation is going to be the answer to most of your anxiety problems. Some people it doesn't matter. They're even uncomfortable speaking in a small group of people. They may be even uncomfortable speaking with one other person. For others of us, it doesn't really matter. But understand this, just because you're comfortable speaking in front of other people does not mean you are well prepared and well equipped to present a presentation. It just may mean you're comfortable, but it could also lead you to assume that you're more prepared than you are because you're saying, well, I'm comfortable. Well, have you practiced? Well, not really, but I can just get up there and wing it. Well, most people who think they can wing it really can't. So caution, if you are comfortable, great, but don't assume that means you are prepared. They also point out that nervousness is normal. Almost everybody feels nervous speaking in front of a group. And it's not that the fact that you're nervous, it's how nervous are you, and are you able to manage and control that nervousness, even shift that energy into a positive direction. You see, one thing about being nervous, it means we won't take things for granted. We will practice, we will prepare, we will work, we will develop a great speech, and that nervousness just keeps us on our toes. It keeps us aware of what's going on. So nervousness is not bad, but it is very popular and common. So some suggestions. Number one, acquire speaking experience. Now, probably if you're not a public speaker already, it is very likely that very few people are going to seek you out and ask you to do public speaking. But it might be in a classroom, it might be at your place of worship, where there are going to be opportunities, and sometimes you have to take the initiative to ask somebody in charge to say, may I give a presentation? Start small, but opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, put yourself out there to be available for public speaking. Second is prepare, prepare, prepare. That's the answer to most issues. People think, well, I'm not a good public speaker, or my nervousness is too great, I don't want to do that. It's usually because they didn't prepare adequately. And we're going to talk a lot about preparing and what to do to get ready. But just so you understand, don't assume just because you're nervous means you're not good at public speaking. It just may be that you're not taking the sufficient amount of time to prepare. I think it is there in the notes. I mentioned the TED Talks. And they prepare for those speeches, which seemingly are seamless and perfect, 200 times going through their speeches. That's why they look so confident and comfortable and at peace, because they've practiced 200 times. Can you imagine how great you would be if you went through your speech 200 times? Not 2, not 5, not even 10, 200. I can't imagine how amazing I would be if I went through but usually we don't have that much time. They have months and months and months to prepare. We usually only have a few weeks, but we can probably do more than what we usually do. Be optimistic. Have a positive attitude coming in saying, I'm nervous. I don't want to do this. I didn't choose to do this. That's the way it is. So I'm going to get up there and do my very best, knowing that I'm well prepared and well practiced. Another thing that might be encouraging, noticing that your nervousness is not visible. You might be shaking on the inside, your knees might be quaking, but most people don't notice it because, to be honest, in a speech class, they're usually thinking about how they're going to have to get up there. And they're thinking probably more about themselves than about you and what are you doing that they want to, steal your strategies of how you're presenting. So don't think that they're all watching and think, oh, she's really nervous. Oh, he's really nervous. Oh, look at how nervous he is. Look at those knees shaking. They're not thinking that. So if that's helpful, that's good. Don't expect perfection. It's probably not going to be perfect, but just do your best. Okay, then another thing I want to point out, and this is throughout the textbook, there are these checklists involved. These checklists will go through critical elements of whatever skill it is, choosing a topic, developing your introduction, your conclusion, your preparation outline. There'll be a checklist for you. And I think they're great because they kind of go through, and if you forgot something, it points it out, says, did you include doing your speaking outline like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you just check, yep, I did that, nope, I didn't do that. I intentionally didn't do that. But if there's something you missed, it's a reminder to go fix it before you do your presentation. Okay, next is this concept of critical thinking. Now, when we hear the word critical, we usually think somebody who's furrowed eyebrow, they're annoyed, they're angry, and they're looking at us for something to be wrong, in this case, in our presentations. That's not what we're talking about at all. The word critical gets a lot of negative press because it can mean mean, negative, hostile, looking for something wrong. It can mean all that, but the word critical, really a better word, quite often might be the word evaluation. I think of SpongeBob with his imagination. Remember that? Anyway, evaluation, that they are critiquing, evaluating, looking for strengths and weaknesses, not to criticize, but to point it out maybe so that you can learn and grow and be better. So quite often, people who are doing critical thinking, they are on your side and want you to succeed, but they just say, maybe this feedback will give them a little bit of help and encouragement. So I want you all to be critical. I don't want you to be critical per se, but I want you all to be critical thinkers. When you watch the news, when you watch a movie, fun to be around when you're doing that. When you're watching a television special, if you're reading a report, reading a textbook, always be thinking in that critical mindset. What am I learning here? What's the big picture? What am I walking away with? Did they say this well? Are there other points of view they are not considering? That's all critical thinking. So a great skill to develop. Now, they also go over in the textbook the speech process. Later on, in fact, I just posted something in announcements today that will be coming up called the speech process overview. That's a 20-step overview of what goes into a speech. That's not what this is talking about. The speech process is saying when you communicate with others, there are a variety of elements that are going on. Now, in the past, we've always thought of what we can consider what they call linear communication. That is, basically a speaker communicates to a listener and different elements that go in that. But then they realize that there is a more transactional process that's going on than just that linear speaker to listener. And so they have developed all these other elements, and it's worthwhile to review this content because we want to understand that there's a lot more going on in our speaking and listening than what we usually think about. And when we know about the parts, then we can take those issues into account when we are developing our speeches. So they start off talking about first the speaker. That is the one sending the message to the listener. They will take a message, which is the content. They will encode it into a particular channel, which is the method of communication. Maybe it's written, maybe it's spoken, maybe it's nonverbal, maybe it's sign language, but all sorts of different methods to encode that message into a channel to send it to somebody else. And then that message is sent to the listener who receives the message. And then other things to take into account: the frame of reference. When you and I walk into a speaking or listening situation, we come with maybe what we would call baggage. We have things on our mind that happened before. We have items that are coming up on our list next, and that may be clouding our ability to communicate well or listen well. And so they list out some of the frames of reference: our knowledge, our experiences, our background, and they're either going to help or hinder our communication. Feedback is what the listener sends to the speaker, quite often in the form of nonverbal communication. If their eyes are fluttering like they're closing, it may mean they're tired. If they cross their arms, and I do that quite a bit, when they cross their arms, maybe it means they are angry. Maybe it means they are shifting into critical thinking mode. Maybe that's just what they do out of habit for no reason. Or putting their hands on their hips, or shifting from foot to foot. That may mean they have to use the restroom, or they really got to get going and they're kind of getting nervous and anxious. So, but the speaker should watch for that feedback and then adjust their message, shorten it, lengthen it, shift topics, stop talking. What feedback are you sending as a listener, and is the speaker then responding appropriately? Another element they talk about is interference. Interference is whatever might get in the way of speaking or listening in that communication process. They say there is external interference. If you're in a room with the air conditioner going or the heater going or outside noise coming in, that's external noise. And there's also internal. That is what's coming from the inside. Anything from my marriage is falling apart and I can't listen to anybody, or you hit a nerve in something you said and now they're thinking more about that, their childhood or their other classes, but something you hit a nerve, and so that internal noise is getting in the way. And then the time and place, what we call the situation, the conditions that are going on. Is the room too dark? Is it too noisy? Is it too quiet? Is it a big room with just a few people, or a smaller room with a huge crowd? All those conditions are going to affect the communication process. So now we're moving into this last section on speaking in a multicultural world. And just a few things here. We probably all get this, but maybe we don't take it into account as much, that we live in a multicultural, diverse society. That there are things going on around us from backgrounds, language differences, cultural differences, lifestyle differences that we just need to be aware of in our presentations. And we need to take those into consideration. For example, the language I use, is that reflecting possibly the multicultural background of my audience? Is that being reflected there? And number 3, they say it takes work. It takes an effort. It makes an intentional choice on our part. It's good to acknowledge it, but it's going to be more important that we put in the work to evaluate my presentations of how, in the audience that I have, how do I need to reflect that reality of the importance of multicultural awareness that's reflected then in my speaking and presentations. And then the last comment it makes is we need to be careful to avoid judging or rejecting a message from someone else because they come from a different cultural background or speak a different language or represent a different point of view. We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to put on a smile and say, oh, that was great, I agree with everything. You don't have to do that. We're just saying, give them a fair hearing. Do not just simply judge them because they speak a different language and say, oh, that means this. Let the message be what you're going to use critical thinking and evaluate, not simply the person because of their background, their culture, their environment, their language, all that. Okay, so that's chapter 1. It took 20 minutes, so I'm going to be posting this video soon and follow up with a couple of more. All right, thank you.